The question should have been harmless. Claire stepped out of the guest room wearing a dark green dress, smoothed one hand over the fabric at her waist, and turned toward me. Well? She asked. I was standing in my kitchen with a coffee mug halfway to my mouth, and for several seconds I forgot there was supposed to be an answer. The dress wasn't revealing. That wasn't the problem. The problem was that Claire looked completely unlike the woman I had spent the previous 3 years thinking of as someone I needed to protect. She looked confident, alive, beautiful. And because I was apparently incapable of behaving like an adult, I stared long enough for her to notice. One corner of her mouth lifted. Want a closer look? My eyes snapped to hers. What? She laughed softly, but there was nervousness underneath it. You've been staring for 10 seconds, Ethan. I was not. You absolutely were. I was evaluating the dress. Very thoroughly. She took one step toward me. That was when the joke stopped feeling like a joke. Because Claire was my sister-in-law. More precisely, she was my late brother's wife. And until that moment, I had spent 3 years believing that whatever complicated feelings existed between us had to remain unnamed forever. Then Claire looked directly at me and said, You know, eventually one of us is going to have to admit this is getting ridiculous. Before I tell you what she meant, subscribe to the channel if you enjoy emotional stories about people finding the courage to choose life again after loss. And leave a comment telling me whether love can arrive twice without diminishing what came before, because that was the question Claire and I were both terrified to answer. The story I'm telling follows the relationship-focused, first-person American romance framework in the supplied story guide, including adult characters, gradual romantic progression, and non-explicit treatment. My name is Ethan Walker, and when that happened, I was 36 years old, living in Fort Collins in Colorado, and running a small residential architecture firm I had started with my older brother, Ryan. Claire was 34. She had been married to Ryan for 7 years before a drunk driver crossed the center line on a highway outside Boulder and ended the future. All three of us had assumed was waiting for us. Ryan died before the ambulance reached the hospital. Claire survived the phone call that changed her life, which sometimes seemed like a crueler assignment. I survived losing the person who had been my brother, business partner, occasional enemy, permanent ally, and closest friend since childhood. There was no romantic story between Claire and me in the beginning. I need to make that clear because people like to rewrite the past once they know the ending. I had never secretly wanted my brother's wife while he was alive. Claire had never flirted with me. Ryan trusted both of us completely, and he had every reason to. Before the accident, Claire was simply family. She was the woman who remembered everybody's birthdays, corrected Ryan when he exaggerated fishing stories, and made enough food for 12 people whenever 6 were coming over. After Ryan died, she became something else in my mind. A responsibility I had inherited without anyone asking whether either of us wanted that arrangement. The morning after the funeral, I found her sitting on the back steps of the house she and Ryan had bought 2 years earlier. She was holding a mug of coffee that had gone cold. Everybody keeps asking what I need, she said. What do you need, Ben? I asked. For everybody to stop asking. I sat beside her. We stayed there almost 40 minutes without talking. When I finally stood, she caught my sleeve. Ethan? Yeah? Don't disappear. I won't. At the time, I meant that as a brother-in-law making a promise to his brother's widow. I had no idea how complicated keeping it would become. The first year was survival. Claire had to deal with insurance paperwork, Ryan's belongings, financial accounts, family expectations, and a house filled with memories she could neither keep looking at nor bear to remove. I handled the business because she couldn't walk into the office without seeing Ryan's name on the glass wall. My parents dealt with their grief by holding tighter to Claire. My mother called her almost every day. My father fixed things at her house that weren't broken. I became the person Claire called when the water heater failed, when she needed someone to take Ryan's truck to be sold, or when she found a box of his belongings and couldn't decide what to do with it. None of that felt romantic. Grief stripped everything down to practical tasks. Then the second year came and something began changing. Claire returned to her work as an occupational therapist. She started hiking again. She repainted the bedroom. She donated some of Ryan's clothes. My mother cried when she heard about that, which made Claire feel guilty enough to call me at 11 at night. Was it too soon? She asked. For who? Your mom. They weren't mom's clothes. Ethan. Claire, Ryan isn't in those shirts. She was quiet. I know. Do you? Another silence. Then she said, "Some days?" That was probably the first moment I understood that helping Claire did not mean helping her preserve the exact life she had lost. Sometimes it meant defending her right to build another one. By the third year, we had developed routines nobody had planned. Sunday coffee every couple of weeks, dinner when one of us had a bad day, hiking when the weather was good. Claire still attended birthdays and holidays with my family, but she had also begun building a life that belonged to her rather than to Ryan's memory. She moved out of their house and bought a smaller place near Old Town. I helped renovate it. We spent 6 weekends stripping wallpaper, repainting cabinets, replacing light fixtures, and arguing about whether a perfectly functional interior wall needed to be removed. "It blocks the light," she insisted. "It holds up part of your house." Details. Those are important details in architecture. She handed me a sledgehammer. "Figure it out." That is not how engineering works. You're the architect. Exactly why I'm refusing to destroy your house. We laughed more during those weeks than we had since Ryan died. At first, the laughter made both of us uncomfortable. Then, one afternoon, Claire said something I never forgot. We were sitting on the unfinished kitchen floor eating sandwiches because the table was covered in tools. She laughed at a stupid story about Ryan and then suddenly stopped. I used to feel guilty when I laughed. Why? Because he couldn't. I didn't know how to answer. Claire looked down at her sandwich. That sounds horrible. No, it does. It sounds like grief. She looked at me. When did you stop feeling guilty? I haven't completely. Neither have I. I bumped my shoulder lightly against hers. Maybe we don't have to wait until guilt gives us permission. She smiled. That sounded suspiciously wise. Don't tell anyone. What neither of us acknowledged was that our relationship had quietly stopped being built only around Ryan. We talked about work, books, terrible dates, family, money, movies, and the ridiculous neighbor who kept leaving passive-aggressive notes about Claire's recycling bins. She knew when I was pretending not to be stressed. I knew when she was saying she was fine because she didn't want advice. When I had pneumonia, she showed up with groceries and informed me that living alone did not mean I was allowed to die because I was too stubborn to visit urgent care. When she injured her ankle hiking, I drove her to appointments for 2 weeks. Somewhere inside all those ordinary moments, I started noticing her differently. I hated myself the first time it happened. Claire was standing on a ladder painting the trim around a window, wearing old jeans and one of my company t-shirts because she had ruined hers with paint. She turned and smiled at me. Something moved in my chest that had absolutely nothing to do with family. I immediately walked outside. Claire followed a minute later. What happened? Nothing. You just abandoned me holding a paintbrush on a ladder. Needed air. She studied me. Are you okay? Fine. She didn't believe me, but she let it go. I spent the drive home telling myself it was loneliness. Then I spent the next 6 months proving that explanation wrong. I dated other women. Claire dated other men. That should have solved everything. Instead, it clarified it. I went out with a real estate attorney named Megan for almost 4 months. She was smart, funny, attractive, and emotionally available. There was no reason for it not to work, except that every time the relationship approached seriousness, I stepped backward. Megan eventually asked me whether there was someone else. No, I said, which was technically true. There's someone, she replied. There isn't. Then there's a ghost. That sentence hit me so hard I couldn't answer. We ended things kindly a week later. Claire dated a teacher named Adam for several months. I met him once at a family barbecue. He seemed decent. I disliked him immediately, which told me considerably more about myself than about him. I kept my distance afterward. Then Claire called me one Saturday morning. Adam and I broke up. I'm sorry. Are you? I paused. That's unfair. I know, sorry. What happened? He wanted something I couldn't give him. What? A relationship where he didn't feel like he was competing with someone who died. I sat down. Were you comparing him to Ryan? Sometimes. That's understandable. Understandable doesn't make it fair. No. She was quiet. There was something else. What? Nothing. Claire. I'll tell you another time. She didn't. That other time arrived 5 months later because of the green dress. Claire had been invited to a fundraising dinner organized by the hospital network where she worked. She was receiving an award for a rehabilitation program she had helped create for patients recovering from traumatic injuries. My parents were attending. Claire had originally planned to go alone, but 2 days before the event, she called me. I need a favor. How expensive? Potentially catastrophic. Go on. Come to the gala with me. As what? A person wearing a suit. Specific. My parents can't come. Your parents will be there. I hate those events alone. Sure. That easy? Did you expect negotiations? Usually. I'm evolving. The afternoon of the event, her apartment building lost water after a pipe broke, so she came to my house to get ready. That was how I ended up in the kitchen when she walked out wearing the dress. She had asked me a simple question. I gave her silence. Well, she repeated. You look... I stopped. Claire tilted her head. Dangerous word coming? Beautiful. Her expression changed. Oh. What? Nothing. You asked. I know. She turned slightly toward the hallway mirror. Is it too much? No. Too formal? No. Wrong color? Claire. What? You look beautiful. She caught my eyes in the mirror. I stared longer than I should have. That was when she smirked. Want a closer look? What? You're staring. Sorry. I didn't say stop. Every alarm in my head went off simultaneously. Claire turned to face me fully. Eventually, one of us is going to have to admit this is getting ridiculous. What is? This. That is an aggressively vague noun, like, you know exactly what I mean. I put my coffee down it. Claire. There, that voice. What voice? The one you use whenever you're about to remind yourself I was married to Ryan. That landed with uncomfortable precision. You were. Yes. He was my brother. I'm aware. Then you understand why this is complicated. Of course I understand. She crossed her arms. Do you think it isn't complicated for me? I didn't say that. You never say anything. What would you like me to say? Claire looked at me for several seconds. Tell me why you stopped dating Megan. That's none of your business. Probably not. Then why ask? Because Adam and I broke up partly because of you. My stomach dropped. What? That was the other thing I didn't tell you. Claire, I never did anything. I know. I never interfered. I know that too. Then what are you saying? She took a breath. I'm saying Adam asked me whether there was someone alive he was competing with too. I didn't move. And? I couldn't tell him no. We were late to the gala because neither of us knew what to do with that confession. Eventually, Claire picked up her coat and said, We need to leave. I drove. The entire 20-minute trip passed with the kind of silence that feels louder than conversation. At a red light, I finally said, How long? Claire looked out the passenger window. I don't know. That isn't an answer. Because there isn't a clean answer. Try. She folded her hands in her lap. Maybe during the renovation, maybe before, I started realizing I was looking forward to seeing you for reasons that weren't about Ryan. Why didn't you tell me? For exactly the same reasons you didn't tell me. You don't know how I feel. Claire turned toward me. Ethan, you stared at me like you forgot your own name. Despite everything, I laughed. That's your evidence? Among other things. The light turned green. I drove another block. My parents, I said. I know. Your parents. I know. People will think whatever they want. Claire, some of them will think this started before Ryan died. Then they'll be wrong. That doesn't mean it won't hurt. No, it doesn't. She looked at me. But if the only reason we refuse to consider something real is because strangers might misunderstand it, then we're letting people who weren't part of our marriage and aren't part of our lives decide what happens next. The gala made everything worse before it made anything better. My mother saw us arrive together and immediately smiled in a way I couldn't interpret. Claire received her award halfway through dinner. She stood on stage and spoke about patients rebuilding lives after catastrophic injury. Recovery, she said, doesn't mean returning to exactly who you were before something happened. Sometimes that person, that life, no longer exists. Recovery means learning that a changed life can still be a meaningful one. I sat beside my parents listening to her, and the words hit differently because of the conversation in the car. When Claire returned to the table, my mother squeezed her hand. Ryan would be so proud. Claire smiled, but I saw the familiar shadow pass over her face. Thank you. Later, while my father was speaking to another guest, Mom leaned toward me. She looks happy tonight. She does. You look terrified. I nearly dropped my glass. What? Ethan. Mom, I'm your mother. That doesn't explain anything. It explains enough. I glanced toward Claire, who was speaking to a colleague. There's nothing happening. Mom followed my gaze. Is that because there's nothing there or because you've decided there shouldn't be? I stared at her. You can't ask me that. I just did. She was Ryan's wife. My mother's expression softened. I remember. How could you possibly be okay with... I couldn't finish. She looked toward the stage where Ryan's photograph had appeared earlier in a memorial slide connected to the rehabilitation program. Losing one child doesn't make me want the people who survived him to stop living. That conversation stayed with me for days. Claire and I did not discuss what had happened at my house. We texted normally but avoided being alone together. It was cowardly, and both of us knew it. Finally, she called. Coffee tomorrow? Sure. Neutral location. Are we negotiating a treaty? Possibly. We met at a cafe near her office. Claire arrived directly from work, hair pulled back, no green dress, no flirtatious smile. Somehow she made me more nervous that way. I need to establish something, she said after sitting down. Okay. I'm not asking you to replace Ryan. I know. No, I need you to actually hear it. If anything ever happened between us, I would not want you because you remind me of him. Do I? Sometimes. That's reassuring. You have the same terrible habit of leaving cabinet doors open. Genetic. But you're different people. Ryan was impulsive. You calculate everything. Ryan could charm an entire room. You'd rather redesign the room so nobody has to talk. Accurate. He made me feel adventurous. You make me feel understood. I looked down at my coffee. That sounds dangerously close to a compliment. Don't get excited. Then Claire asked this question I had spent months avoiding. Do you want me? I looked at her. That's direct. We've wasted enough time being indirect. Yes. Her shoulders lowered slightly. Okay. That's all? No, but I needed the answer. Do you want me? Yes. Hearing it said without joking changed something. What do we do? I asked. We don't do anything quickly. Good. We go on a date. We already have dinner together constantly. Not dinner, a date. One where we both acknowledge what it is. And if it feels wrong, then we stop. And family? Later. Claire. Later, Ethan. I spent 3 years learning that you cannot solve every future problem before taking the next step. I smiled. That sounds like something a therapist would say? Occupational therapist. Still counts. She reached across the table and rested her hand over mine. It was the first deliberately romantic touch between us. No accident, no ambiguity. One date, she said. One date, I agreed. Our first date was terrible. That became one of my favorite memories. We chose a restaurant where neither of us had ever gone with Ryan. Claire arrived separately. I brought flowers and immediately regretted it because she stared at them like I had handed her an explosive. Too much? I asked. I don't know. I can put them back in the car. That somehow makes it worse. Great start. She laughed, took the flowers, and kissed my cheek. Both of us froze. Sorry, she said. Why? Habit. You've never kissed my cheek as a habit. Then panic. Better. Dinner began awkwardly because we already knew almost everything people normally discover on early dates. I knew her childhood stories. She knew mine. I knew her favorite food, her political opinions, her career ambitions, and the exact face she made when a waiter said the kitchen was out of something she wanted. So, instead of asking ordinary questions, Claire asked, what are you afraid of? Tonight? Generally. I thought about lying. Being happy with you and then feeling guilty about being happy. Her expression softened. Me too. Your turn. That one. You can't copy. Fine. I'm afraid your family will think I'm replacing Ryan with you. My mother already knows. Claire stopped. What? I told her about the gala conversation. By the time I finished, she had tears in her eyes. She said that? Almost exactly. Claire looked away. I've been terrified of hurting her. She's terrified we'll stop living because we think grief requires it. We didn't kiss that night. At Claire's door, I wanted to. She wanted to too, I could see it, but she said, not yet. Okay. You're not disappointed? Of course I'm disappointed, she laughed. Thank you for admitting it. Disappointed and respectful can coexist. Good answer. I rehearsed it. She touched my arm. Good night, Ethan. We went on another date the next week, then another. The strangest part was how quickly the romantic side began feeling natural once we stopped pretending it didn't exist. Claire flirted more than I expected. I was apparently funnier when I wasn't policing every thought. We also talked about Ryan more, not less. That surprised me. I'd assumed dating Claire would make his name dangerous. Instead, honesty made him easier to remember. One evening, we were cooking at my house when Claire laughed because I cut onions exactly the way Ryan had. He taught me, I said. Of course he did. Then she went quiet. Does that bother you? No. Really? Claire, I'm his brother. There will always be things about me that remind you of him. And there will always be things about me that remind you of us together. Yes. We can handle that? I think pretending otherwise would be worse. She looked at me for a long moment. Come here. Why? Stop asking engineering questions. She kissed me. The kiss was gentle and brief, but afterward Claire rested her forehead against mine and began crying. I immediately stepped back. I'm sorry. Don't. Claire, you didn't do anything wrong. Then why are you crying? She wiped her face angrily. Because I liked it. That answer broke my heart more than if she had said she hated it. And that feels wrong? Part of me thinks it should. Do you want me to leave? No. Do you want to stop? She considered it. Not forever. Tonight, yes. Then we stop. I finished dinner while she sat at the counter. We talked about something completely unrelated until she felt steady enough to drive home. That became our pattern. We moved forward only when both of us could do it, without treating discomfort as something to overpower. Sometimes grief appeared unexpectedly. Sometimes it didn't. Slowly, guilt stopped being the loudest thing in the room. 3 months later, we told my parents. Claire insisted on doing it herself. We sat in their living room where Ryan and Claire had announced their engagement almost a decade earlier. My father listened silently. My mother already knew enough not to be surprised. Ethan and I have been seeing each other, Claire said. Dad looked at me. How long? 3 months? Before that? Nothing, I said immediately. Absolutely nothing. Dad nodded. Claire said, I need you to know I loved Ryan. My father's face changed. Claire, nobody here doubts that. I do sometimes. Why? Because this makes me feel like people will question everything before. Dad leaned forward. You were with my son when he died. You didn't leave him. Life took him. There's a difference. Claire started crying. My mother moved beside her. Dad looked at me. And you? What about me? Are you serious? Yes. Then don't treat her like something you have to apologize for. That was his entire speech. It was enough. Claire's parents reacted differently. Her father was supportive. Her mother, Diane, struggled. She didn't accuse us of anything improper, but she became distant. Eventually, Claire confronted her. I wasn't there, but Claire told me afterward. She said seeing us together makes Ryan feel farther away. That's painful. I know. What did you say? That I understand, but I can't make my life smaller to keep everybody else's memories comfortable. How did she respond? She cried. And? So did I. Diane needed time. We gave it to her. What we didn't do was end our relationship to make the discomfort disappear. That was Claire's boundary, and I respected it. 6 months later, Diane invited both of us to dinner. She was awkward with me at first. Then while Claire was helping her father outside, Diane said, I owe you an apology. You don't. Let me finish. I nodded. I kept thinking if Claire loved someone else, it meant the chapter with Ryan had somehow been revised. I understand. No, I don't think you did anything wrong. I just wasn't ready. Are you now? She looked through the window at Claire, laughing with her father. I'm trying. That was enough, too. The greatest threat to our relationship came from inside it. About a year after our first date, Claire was offered a position in Seattle directing a new rehabilitation program. It was the kind of opportunity she had wanted for years. She almost declined before telling me. When I found out, I was furious. Why didn't you tell me? Because I know you won't leave the firm. You don't get to decide that. Ethan, your company was Ryan's too. Exactly, and Ryan has been gone 4 years. I'm allowed to decide what the company means now. Would you move? I don't know. Then why create a problem? Because it's our problem. The words hung between us. Claire looked away. I'm scared. Of Seattle? Seattle? Of asking you to sacrifice something for me. That isn't your decision either. What if you resent me? What if you decline and resent me? She had no answer. We spent the next month examining options instead of protecting each other from them. Claire visited Seattle. I went with her. I met with architects there and discovered that expanding my firm into the Pacific Northwest was not as absurd as I had assumed. More importantly, Claire discovered the job itself involved far more administration and far less patient work than she wanted. She declined it. Not because of me, because after seeing the reality, she didn't want it. That distinction mattered. A few months later, another opportunity opened much closer to home. Director of Rehabilitation Innovation for a Colorado hospital system. Claire applied and got it. On the evening she received the offer, she came to my house carrying champagne, billionaire. I'm assuming that means good news. Very. She held up the bottle. I'm officially important. You've always been terrifying. Different thing. We celebrated on the back patio. At some point, Claire went inside and returned wearing the same dark green dress from the gala. I stared. She noticed immediately. Seriously? What? Again? You kept the dress. Obviously. Why are you wearing it? Historical significance. She turned once, smiling. How does it look? Dangerous question. Answer. Beautiful. You're staring again. I'm allowed now. Claire stepped closer. Want a closer look? I laughed. You have been waiting years to reuse that line. Absolutely. I took her hand instead. Actually, I have something else. I had bought the ring 3 weeks earlier. I wasn't waiting for her promotion. I wasn't trying to turn her career achievement into my moment. I had planned to propose the following weekend, but standing there with Claire, wearing the dress that had forced us to confront what we were avoiding, felt strangely right. Before I do this, I said, I need you to understand something. Her smile disappeared when she saw the small box in my hand. Ethan. I loved Ryan. I still love Ryan. You loved him too. Nothing we do changes that. Tears immediately appeared in her eyes. I know. For years I thought loving you would somehow take something away from him. Then I realized love doesn't work like property. What I feel for you belongs to us. It doesn't rewrite anything. I opened the box. Claire Bennett, I don't want to be the man who helped you survive losing my brother. I want to be the man who builds whatever comes next with you, if that's what you want to. She covered her mouth. That is an unfairly good speech. I practiced. Obviously. Will you marry me? Claire looked at the ring, then at me. Yes. That sounded suspiciously fast. Do you want me to reconsider? Absolutely not. She laughed through tears and held out her hand. We didn't announce the engagement immediately. The first person we told was my mother. She cried before Claire finished the sentence. My father hugged me, then Claire, then disappeared into the kitchen, because apparently men in my family dealt with strong emotion by inspecting refrigerators. Diane cried too, but this time she hugged Claire afterward. Marking the engagement publicly was harder. We knew there would be people who misunderstood. A few did. One distant relative made a comment online implying the relationship must have started before Ryan died. Claire saw it before I could shield her from it. My first instinct was anger. Hers was calmer. Don't respond. They're accusing us of... I know. It's disgusting. And arguing with them won't change what happened. Doesn't it bother you? Of course. She took my hand. But I spent years living according to imaginary judgments. I'm finished doing that. I deleted the response I had started writing. Claire was right. The people who mattered knew the timeline. More importantly, we knew. We married in a small ceremony outside Estes Park the following summer. We did something neither of us expected. We included Ryan. Not in a dramatic memorial display, and not in a way that made the wedding feel like an extension of grief. We placed a small photograph of him on a table with photographs of other relatives we had lost. That was Claire's idea. Are you sure? I asked when she suggested it. Yes. You don't think it'll feel strange? Pretending he didn't exist would feel stranger. She was right. On our wedding morning, I stood alone beside that table before the guests arrived. I looked at my brother's photograph. He was 29 in it, laughing at something outside the frame. For years, I had imagined what he might think about Claire and me. It was an impossible question because dead people don't get to give permission. Eventually, I realized I had been asking it because I was afraid to accept responsibility for my own happiness. I miss you, I said quietly. There was no answer. There didn't need to be. Claire walked toward me an hour later wearing a simple ivory dress. I had expected guilt, and instead I felt something closer to gratitude. Not gratitude that Ryan was gone. Never that. Gratitude that grief had not been the final chapter for either of us. Claire reached me and smiled. You're staring. I laughed. I have a history. Want a closer look? Very much. She took my hands. We made promises that deliberately avoided language about replacing what came before. We promised honesty, patience, independence, and choice. When the officiant pronounced us married, Claire kissed me while my mother cried in the front row and my father pretended not to. Marriage did not erase the strange edges of our history. Our first Christmas as husband and wife, Claire found one of Ryan's old ornaments while unpacking decorations. She sat on the floor holding it for several minutes. I sat beside her. You okay? Yeah. Want to put it up? Do you? Of course. We hung it near the top of the tree. 2 days later, I found Claire standing in front of it. Sometimes I still miss him so much it hurts, she said. I know. Does that hurt you? No. Really? Claire, he was my brother. She nodded. Right. I put my arm around her. You don't have to stop loving someone who died to prove you love someone who's here. She leaned against me. You know that applies to you too. I'm learning. Years passed. Claire built her rehabilitation program into one of the hospital system's most successful initiatives. I expanded the architecture firm and finally removed Ryan's name from the legal business title, a decision that took me 5 years longer than it should have. The day the new sign went up, I stood outside staring at it. Claire joined me. How does it feel? Like I'm betraying him. Do you actually believe that? No. But if it feels like it. Yes. She took my hand. Then maybe feelings don't always get the final vote. That was something I had once told her. You've been saving that. For years. Cruel. Effective. One evening, nearly 8 years after the gala, we were getting ready for another hospital fundraiser. I was tying my necktie when Claire called from the bedroom. Ethan? Yeah? I need an opinion. That sentence has historically caused trouble. She appeared in the doorway wearing a new blue dress. I deliberately looked at the ceiling. Very nice. You didn't look. Safety protocol. Look at me. I did. She smiled. Well? I let myself stare this time. Beautiful. That took 6 seconds. I'm married to you. Different rules. Want a closer look? You desperately need new material. She walked over and straightened my tie. It still works. Unfortunately. She kissed my cheek. Ready? Yeah, we headed downstairs together. Sometimes people ask how I reconciled falling in love with my brother's widow. The truthful answer is that I never found a perfect explanation. Life rarely gives you relationships that fit cleanly into categories. Ryan was my brother. Claire was his wife. Then Ryan died, and Claire remained a living person whose story did not end because his did. I remained a living person too. For years, both of us confused loyalty with emotional paralysis. We thought honoring him meant protecting the shape of a life that no longer existed. Eventually, we understood that memory and movement could coexist. That green dress did not make me fall in love with Claire. By the time she asked how she looked, I was already in trouble. The dress simply removed one of the excuses I had been using. When she caught me staring and asked whether I wanted a closer look, she wasn't really inviting me to admire what she was wearing. She was challenging me to acknowledge the person standing in front of me instead of seeing her only through the relationship she had once had with my brother. It took us months after that moment to understand what choosing each other would require. and years to become completely comfortable with the fact that happiness after loss can contain gratitude and sadness at the same time. If there is one thing our story taught me, it is that moving forward is not the same as erasing what came before. Claire never stopped having a past with Ryan. I never stopped having a brother. We simply stopped treating those truths as reasons we were forbidden from having a future. So if this story stayed with you, subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments what you think. Can loving someone new honor the life you had before, rather than replace it? I used to think the answer was complicated. Now, whenever Claire catches me staring and gives me that familiar smirk, I know exactly what mine is.